Ocala's information station, 1370 WOCA.
Ocala.
All right, 25 minutes before 10 o'clock. Beautiful Wednesday. Hope you're doing well. Remember, cold temperatures coming in, so if you got to do something about the things you have outdoors, you got a few hours to get that done. I think tonight the temperatures are not as cold as tomorrow night. Anyway, I'm not a meteorologist. I just play one on the radio and on the phone. When you were a kid, Robin, when you were a child.
Yeah.
See, we call our own children. We call ourselves kids when we were kids. Anyway, when you were younger and somebody would say to you, what do you want to be when you grow up, right? You might have said teacher. You might have said fireman or something like that.
Yeah.
Archaeologists used to come up. We may not have known how to pronounce it. But we knew, because you go to the museums, right? You see those bones, you say, whoa!
Yeah, it's cool.
I want to be the guy who finds this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Right? That's what you want to do. And we are being introduced to an archaeologist in the studio right now, and he actually has the look. It's exactly the look you would expect of an archaeologist. And he's in the studio with a good friend. Lee Schwartz has been a friend of ours and a friend of the station and the show for a long time. Lee is at the Bellevue Public Library, the supervisor over there. And I better turn your microphones on. I won't be able to hear you. And Lee has introduced us to Matt O'Brien. The first time we're meeting Matt. He is an archaeologist, also had been with the Marion County Library, right?
For about 7 months now.
For about 7 months, okay. And there's a program called Orange Groves and Grassroots that is tomorrow at 3:30 at the Bellevue Public Library, and that's all I know. So now I turn from my notes and speak to the men who can answer the questions. Lee Schwartz and Matt O'Brien. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning, Larry.
Good morning.
Wow. When you were a kid, did you say I want to be an archaeologist?
Actually, I did not start off with the intention of becoming an archaeologist. As a child, I really never thought about it. I was always very interested in history, but never really thought about what had happened prior to history. When I went back to university, which was sort of later in life for me, I was over 30 when I decided to go back to school. I had a background as a chef prior to that.
Chef?
Yeah, and I knew
wow.
I wanted to get into anthropology, that I wanted to study people, and that anthropology was sort of a holistic study of human beings. And what I found is that it was sort of factionalized these days, that have gone in different directions between cultural and biological and linguistics, and that archaeology was really the last of the subdisciplines of anthropology that was really interested in the holistic study of human beings, that was incorporating culture and biology and language and human interactions with the material world.
Oh, wow. You know what always confused me when I was a kid? The word prehistoric. Because I always thought, if everything before now is history, how is there something before?
It confuses me as well. History we really take to mean at the time when there's a written language. So there's a written record of things, which has its own biases that are inherent to the recordation of history. People have their own agendas a lot of times. So what actually ends up in the written record may not be exactly accurate, and it misses a whole lot of the small details. Prehistory really means before written history. The reason I don't like the term is it sort of makes it sound like there were a bunch of people who had no idea about their own history. And of course, that's not true. People had a sense of their own traditions and history and place in the world. They just didn't necessarily write it down.
So here's maybe a dumb question, I don't know. But I mean, if we can go back in time to the point where, okay, this is where history starts and prehistory ended or something like that, could we actually extend that? Oh, I found something, so now we can write about that. And make that no longer prehistory, but, it's a dumb question maybe, but I mean...
Well, that's really sort of the objective of archaeology.
That's what you're stretching it out a little bit.
You're finding these artifacts and other sort of proxy data, things that indicate, that aren't necessarily material themselves, but say something about what people did while they were living here, environmental conditions, that sort of thing. And it allows you to fill out the historical context. And so in that sense, we're writing it down now, and it becomes sort of a history. And it's a history that's written in the artifacts and the other environmental data, like pollen analysis.
Wow. Got 100 million questions for you, though. This is an interesting topic.
And that's in what you're doing with this program. You're keeping it on a local level for our area?
Let's talk about the program tomorrow. What is that?
That's really one of the reasons that I came up here. I went to University of South Florida and have lived in Tampa and had done my research down there. I was also at Weeden Island in Pinellas County for a long time. And I found out that there was a small community up here. I have family that's owned a house, and that so I guess I knew the community was there. But I found out that the history of it was it had come into being in really all the small towns that are dot the shores of Lake Weir about the 1870s. And this is a time when Marion County had been important as a cotton producer, probably not as important as the 7 counties of Central Florida and North Florida. But it had begun to switch over to citrus fruit. And that really starts in the late 1850s. Up to that, there'd been some freezes and some scale insect infestations, and it suddenly became economically viable to grow fruit and sell that as a way to make a living. And it was these people who moved in around Orange Lake in the north part of the county and around Lake Weir in the southeastern part of the county that found ideal conditions for growing citrus fruit and really kind of took off from there. So people were coming from Tennessee and the Carolinas, but also farther north, and from other countries. There were people from Sweden and Hungary, a couple of noblemen from different parts of Germany.
Wow.
The Baron von Felich, who was well known in the area, ended up moving down into the Pasco Hernando County area.
Oh, wow.
And the Count de Cavillé, and he's actually buried down in Lake County now. So,
oh, wow.
And had lived in Summerfield.
And everything turned around since those days. I mean, now we have very few, at least around here, orange groves.
Much fewer. And of course, there were massive freezes in the mid 1890s and a smaller one in 1899. And it really devastated the citrus crop. But that had all grown back from what had been around at 1835. There's a point where the Spanish are in Florida and they were growing oranges for their own use and also sending them back to Europe. Those had frozen off in 1835. They started to rebound. And like I said, they had some insect problems also in the mid 19th century. And then the freezes of the 1890s came, and that devastated it. We were down to about 4% of the citrus crops that were available prior to those freezes. And then they started to rebound again, and we had the freezes of the early and mid 1980s, and that sort of killed off a lot of the citrus.
Oh, wow. So, go ahead, Rob.
And what about your archaeological finds as far as the animals and things from...
Well,
have you delved into that area as well?
Any chihuahuas buried?
There have been some small mammal bones found, probably not subsistence animals in that sense, raccoon bones, maybe fox bones.
Oh, okay.
That sort of thing. Surprisingly, we set off with an historical objective, and sure enough, most of what I've recovered so far has been stone tools. So it's But the lake has been in use for a long time. It's really sort of an interesting situation in that it's really just a big sandhill with a bowl in it that's full of water. So the common idea has been that there was a spring there. It's a saltwater lake, so it's more or less the antithesis of being a spring-fed lake. And it's separated from the Floridan aquifer by the Hawthorne Formation. And so it's just this big bowl of sand filled with water.
Oh, wow.
And that has its own consequences too, because one of the things that we want to look at is how human use of the area has changed the water quality over time. Because with all these freezes, they would burn off trees, maybe every other tree or every third tree, to try and conserve the trees that were left by heating up the grove space. And all of that runs off into the water. So what we have now is a lake that's in decent condition. It's got a high nitrogen load, but it's just one big introduction of phosphate away from a major disaster.
Oh, really?
Right.
So a lot of what we hear from environmentalists is us. I mean, that's what they say, and you agree that it is, and it's hard to deny that. I mean, we know what we're doing here with our fertilizers and everything else. So.
Right. So the nitrogen's there. We know that. And you can look at sort of lead isotope analysis from soil cores that were taken. They put in a weir structure towards the north end of the lake, which used to have an outlet to the Ocklawaha River. It would go through the Marshall Swamp there at the north end of the lake. When they put in that weir structure, it was a beautiful sand-bottomed lake at one point, and now it's full of this flocculent sediment, this sort of muddy muck that lays down about a meter deep now at the bottom of the lake. And if you analyze that came in with the 1938 weir structure.
Wow. Remember that flocculent sediment.
Yes,
we might need that for the next time some kids say, "Do you come up with a name for our band?"
Yes.
Flocculent sediment. So I want to tell you something. We in Rainbow Lakes Estates in western Marion County, north of Denellen, I lived there for a long time, and the lakes were pretty healthy. Went there maybe a year or 2 years ago now, and I could literally walk the whole thing. I could walk right to the middle of what used to be the lake, and it was all dried up except for a tiny little piece of water. Okay, now the question I have is, if a body of water is polluted and then somehow drains because of drought or whatever, and then the water level comes back up again, will it be pure again? I mean, will the nitrogen problem actually be fixed if we could get rid of it and bring it back?
I think that varies a lot from lake to lake.
Okay.
If you were to completely dry out the basin of something that's spring fed and then it was fed again by that spring, then it would be the water that was coming up from probably the Floridan aquifer.
You would think,
so
yeah.
That, to whatever extent that's pollution free.
Yeah, right.
Which it isn't necessarily anymore, and that connects all through Florida. Then yeah, you'd get sort of a rebound, and even over time, you can take steps to clean up a lake, and then provided you don't introduce any new pollutants.
My solution is probably a bad idea. I mean, there are better ideas on how to fix the problem, right?
Right, and how you would lose that water would vary from lake to lake too. Whether it's like we were saying, if it's evaporated away, or if you have the situation that happened up at Orange Lake now, it's been a decade ago, where a sinkhole opened up and it just drained off.
That's what they say, yeah. You know, we had a young girl in here maybe 5 or 6 years ago. My young girl is maybe 15 years old. I mentioned her this morning because there was something in the news this morning about this housing development that's going up on the Rainbow River, and she came in to protest that. This was like 5 years ago, and whether the listeners wanted to agree or disagree with her take that these homes were going to pollute the water, that's a different debate. Our position was, wow, 15 years old, and you know how to use the media to express your thoughts, to try to get something done that you feel is important, and everybody who does that, it doesn't matter what age, but I think the younger you are, the more impressive it is, I think. So.
Yeah, and I don't know that situation, but I'm inclined to agree because
I know.
I've had similar experiences where they put in new housing developments and didn't account for the runoff and so forth. So you have sort of pollutants that are being introduced at the household level and then running off into the street, and then where does that end up? So
were we polluting things in history with simply burning wood? I mean, was that actually a pollutant?
It certainly can be. Yeah, we have polluted through history, and I think that's one of the valuable lessons of archaeology is it's really not about the things that you recover, although they're interesting and they're what's tangible. They're what people can pick up and look at and make an association with, that they're connected somehow with a piece of history and that sort of thing. But what we really want to get at is the behaviors from the past. And so, yeah, there's been the introduction of all sorts of environmental disasters through history, and that have led to droughts and pollutants being introduced to water systems and overpredation of animals.
What's amazing to me is when archaeologists will find like a piece of pottery, like a little shard of something, right? And they'll say, wait a minute, this wasn't the guys we thought it was. This was another guy. So they'll say, well, they were either friends or they lived here before them. And it's amazing to me that they can see that from a little piece of pottery.
Well, early on, and especially sort of in the pre-World War II archaeology, I mean, that was how we recognized cultures, was by what they left behind, by especially things like pottery, because they preserve well. And different people might decorate things in different ways. The style of decoration might change over time. Right. Yeah, and it can be that the people were moving around into different areas, or that they were trading away their pottery to their neighbors. Hey, we make this nice pot, and you've got this particular animal we like to eat. So why don't we do something about that? We'll just trade it out. We'll cook your animal in our pot. You can cook your animal in our pot.
Are you traveling around the country to look at different areas of each of the cities and things to see where they can help preserve what they have?
And I would love to do that. Most of my field research has been here in Florida. Generally speaking, that makes me eligible to work in the Southeast. Generally speaking, I would love to go into other areas, and because my interest is more in historical archaeology and especially issues of urbanization, I think that probably opens me up a little bit more. There's still a lot of regionalization as far as the expectations of people who are going to hire you to bring you in for studies. They have you worked with a material, especially for the prehistoric materials. You have a history with that, you recognize it immediately. That might be the wrong way of looking at things, because given a few months, you can learn to recognize the different material cultures, so the stylistic decorations of pottery and how they change over time. The anthropological theory behind it that you use in your interpretation is sort of broadly addresses anywhere at any time. So
okay, so I have a question to ask you, and you've probably heard this before, and I think it's false. So I'll tell you right away what I think. Pottery, spun on a wheel.
Sure.
It has a little stick that goes into it to carve it out. People say you can play that back and hear people talking. Have you ever heard that? You can hear the voices of cavemen. Did you ever hear this?
Yeah, that sounds familiar. Was there something, if you spun the pot backwards, it would speak in Aramaic, that sort of thing? Wasn't that in a movie somewhere?
Was that a movie? Did anybody hear this but me?
No.
You never heard that?
No.
Really? You never heard this?
Yeah.
So,
well, that works for wheel-thrown pottery, but what about things like coiled pots? One of the styles that we use in making pottery, especially.
But hold on, you said it works for wheel-spun pottery? No.
No,
Okay.
I don't necessarily think that works.
All right. So, Lee, the event we're talking about is tomorrow.
Yes, tomorrow at 3:30 at the Bellevue Public Library. I was talking to Matt, also as a sub at all the libraries, and so one day we were just talking, and he was talking about his research and all this, and said, I really want to present this information to the people Lake Weir, Ocklawaha area. And I thought that was a perfect opportunity to bring him in and do this, because I always feel so dumb listening to Matt because he's so smart. And I don't know, it's great to get all this information, and I get it.
You're smart. Don't say that.
Oh, thank you, thank you, Larry. I almost believed you with this whole wheel thing, this wheel and pot thing.
No, I didn't believe that.
No, okay. But anyway, we were so excited to have him on staff and to share all his knowledge. So we just wanted to have him in. So
was he always out behind the library digging holes? I mean,
yeah. Every time on his break, we're like, what are you doing out there? Yeah, no.
So in your home movies when you were a child, do you dig? Do you know what? I know we're talking about Florida and oranges, but can I ask you about? Yesterday we had this story about Bimini, the road in Bimini.
Sure, I heard that. Yeah.
Can you dig under the water and see if there's anything there?
You can, and there's marine archaeologists that do such things.
Wow.
You can vacuum up the sediments and map things in that way. You can build coffer dams in shallower areas and actually pull out all the water and look at it dry.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if that goes in Bimini, but
I wonder what's there. Do you guys want to take phone calls?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right, we have somebody on the phone. Good morning. Thank you for calling. You're on the air.
Hey, good morning, guys, and thank goodness for public libraries. Where else can we all get together and take a look at the future, the current, or the past? I'm a big defender and supporter of public libraries. I just would say I had an observation. Sorry about that. I had an observation when I was working between Ocala and Orange Lake. There was a large property that was being developed just right off of 441, where that would be considered on the west side of the highway back there, about 1,100 acres. And we were building a stud farm back there, Matt. And there was a headstone there at the top of the hill underneath a large oak tree. And the gentleman that was buried there, the headstone was practically probably over 5 feet tall from the mound. And he was born in England, like in the 1740s, and had died at the turn of the century in the early 1800s. I found that quite bizarre, not really realizing, that he had developed this land and died there. I just found it quite interesting, and I wish somebody in the audience or in the studio could comment on their opinion concerning carbon dating. I'll hang up and listen to that. So, thanks, guys.
Well, carbon dating is useful, and that certainly changed our understanding of the chronology of human occupations of various areas. It has its limitations. When you're talking about dates less than 500 years, it's not incredibly useful. When you're talking about dates over 50,000 years, you've really sort of exceeded its limitations. With accelerator mass spectrometry, they'll look at the various constituent elements that are there other than carbon, and that can kind of extend it out. Some people will tell you up to 100,000 years ago. I wouldn't want to depend on a date like that. And we were talking with somebody who's here in the 1700s. Carbon dating is probably not appropriate for that.
So do you get a lot of people taking you off track? I feel like we're not even on track. I mean, I know we want to talk about the event tomorrow, but you do such a fascinating job. I mean, your work is so fascinating.
I think that caller brought up a good point too, because I wanted to bring up the grassroots end of the program.
Okay.
Is sort of to include the general public in not just the dissemination of results. Hey, I went out and I dug up these materials, I read these primary sources, and I just want to let you know what I found out. I want to include them from the beginning, and I think that the library is an excellent resource for that. What they have is an array of materials, whether you're interested in genealogy, they have the census records over there, they have access to Ancestry.com that you can use while you're in the library. They have historic maps that are kept up at the headquarters branch on 40. So, and also cultural resources reports that have been done from property submissions, multiple property submissions to the National Historic Register, so throughout the county, and then also little settlements like Reddick. There's the report for Reddick. You can find that at the library as well.
Wow. I want to make sure we're fair to the event happening tomorrow, but real quickly, I don't want to be the source for inaccurate information. Listen, I just looked it up while you were talking. Ancient voices recorded onto pottery. This is what it says.
Okay.
This is what it says. It says, in 1969, a guy named Richard G. Woodbridge III published a paper in something called Proceedings of the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, claiming to have played pottery like a brittle clay record.
Wow.
And he believed he was hearing the voices from ancient civilizations. Well, take that for what it's worth, and then kind of fast forward to the Mythbusters guys, Grant Imahara and Carrie Byron and Tori Bellizzi from the Mythbusters TV show. They put some clay tracks together of their own to see whether it could even be done, and they heard nothing. Just
Humans have a brain that was designed to perceive patterns, so I think we'll find patterns even where there aren't. If you spin your record backwards, you might hear voices too.
I know, John.
Really intended to be.
Paul is dead, right? Orange Groves and Grassroots. It's a program tomorrow is this at the Bellevue Public?
At the Bellevue Public Library.
At the Bellevue Public at 3:30. A free event, and Mark, thank you for pointing out that it is a public library, and that is a wonderful thing. Yeah, man, I would hate to see that ever go away.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Has the whole Kindle thing hurt libraries?
Well, it's interesting because the library offers ebooks too. So with your library card, you can download ebooks. You can download music and keep music. You can download magazines. We have like 120 subscriptions, and you can just get them every month that way. So we have to adapt to the new technology, but I think libraries are always going to be relevant because people want to interact in the world and they have to get information, and a lot of people don't have those skills anyhow. We have to help them along, and a lot of people can't afford those things. We have to pool our resources as a community and provide them.
Right.
Yeah, we just have to change with the times.
And a lot of times you have artifacts on display, right?
We do. Yeah, we sure do. When I worked at the Ocala headquarters, there was always, in front of the genealogy room, a really nice display.
Are there any artifacts associated with tomorrow's event?
I don't think I'm going to bring anything with me in that capacity. We were mostly planning to talk about the history, and given the time limitations, I don't want to pull people in there now. All right, for 3 hours we're going to sit here and talk about this, and then I'm going to break out those materials. And really, the built environment is an artifact all of its own. So that's kind of the discussion about that. I think will get us through the presentation.
And do you suspect that some of the questions will be regarding what we can do now to keep our water from being corrupted and polluted? I guess is the word.
I certainly hope so. And, I may not have the most expertise to answer all those questions. You bring in the environmental scientists to deal with that. But if we can elevate awareness and look at where that intersects with archaeological analysis, too, and I think that puts us in a position to look at how it's developed over time.
What is the coolest thing you've ever found or worked with, if maybe somebody else found? I'll tell you the coolest thing I ever found. I found a spearhead. The tip was broken off. My dog was taking a crap. I said, boy, that looks like an arrowhead down there. And so I said, move over, and I got it. And I said, wow, that is an arrowhead, because not knowing it was a spear. Somebody, you know who told me it was a spear? Was Ken Nash from the Discovery Center.
Yeah.
So, wow. I actually know him, and he works with the Gulf Archaeological Research Institute over in Crystal River, and Gary Ellis, who's the director over there, was one of my professors. I got an AA from CF up in here. So
I told you mine. I interrupted you. What was yours?
That's a difficult question because I think it's all interesting when it sheds light on past human behaviors. But having worked in urban Tampa in a neighborhood called The Scrub that was torn down through an urban renewal project in the 50s, but children's toys, jacks and such that were found there. And you sort of look back and go, oh, yeah, okay, these kids had, homemade toys, but they also had store-bought toys, and they were out right here playing with those toys and enjoying themselves. And I think that's been the coolest.
I have an archaeological find right now in my office. It is a drive-in movie theater from 1956.
Yes.
It was a toy. It was a toy drive-in movie theater.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, Robin found it buried in the dirt somewhere on eBay.
Yes.
and if you can, she'll show it to you after we get off. Well, thank you. This is wonderful. I kind of wish we could talk more. Thank you for coming in, Matt. And
thank you for having me.
Again, Lee, thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
Tomorrow, Matt O'Brien brings you Orange Groves and Grassroots. It's a program at the Bellevue Public Library, and it's a beautiful new library, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
Tell people how to get there.
Wow, I'm terrible at directions. Matt, go ahead.
It's on 484, but it's at that new stretch.
It's the new. It's right before you hook onto. It's on the new stretch of 484, right before you hook onto the main part there. After the Bellevue Elementary School, there's like a little S curve, and then there we are.
There's a sign that points you into Bellevue, and there's a turn lane there. So it's you see it coming before you actually have to make the turn. But yeah, I always tell people stay alert when you're going down that road because you'll see the library off to the left, and if you're not careful, you'll have passed
it. You'll fly right by it. Yeah,
turning around.
And I kind of wanted to emphasize that because I think some people who don't go to the Bellevue Library that often still picture it by Lake Lillian.
Yes, yeah.
So
that library now is our Friends of the Library building, and it's a bookstore now.
Okay, so you go there, they'll say, nope, you need to go that way.
Right, and if you want to buy books, we'll send you there. So that's how it goes.
Well, Matt, we're really lucky to have you in our community because you are really providing a lot of useful insight, and you're inspiring other people to be archaeologists themselves as a career choice.
Always like to see that, yeah. And of course, you have the opportunity. There's still an anthropology professor over here at CF, so even if you want to just take classes locally, there's also options like getting involved with the Florida Anthropological Society. That's primarily an archaeological club society, and so you can learn that way. And
have you been to the cave next to the paddock wall?
Yes.
Right across, also behind that furniture store, whatever it is?
Yeah.
Have you been in the cave, though?
I have not been into it, although I hear it's more accessible nowadays. It's
well, I've been on the wooden platform, but you look at it. I see beer cans in there, but
yeah. There's material associated with human behaviors, and it's in the past now.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for coming in, Lee Schwartz. Thank you for everything.
Larry.
Matt O'Brien, nice to meet you. Thank you for coming in. And as Robin said, we are lucky to have you in our community. Thank you.
Pleasure to be here.
All right. I guess we'll just move forward. We'll take a little break. We'll be right back. This is The Source, WOCA.
You're listening to WOCA News Talk 1370, Ocala's source for what's happening in today's hottest, up-to-date news and topics.
Here's what you may have missed on the John Tesh Radio Show.
When people were asked to choose between a bunch of items, they had less stamina and did worse on mental tests afterward. So the fix? Try and go with your gut. What is the top indicator that